you doing, Darren? Where are you?
I am in Long Island, New York. Yourself?
I'm not far from you. We're in New York because we open in theaters tonight in Greenwich Village. So in a hotel room in Midtown.
That was an excellent segue and plug right there. So besides answering the same questions over and over and over again about how much you love Blood, Sweat, and Tears, how's your day going?
The day is going great. You know, as a documentary filmmaker, we sit in these dark editing rooms for months at a time.
Sure.
And we hope we're doing good work, but you don't really know until strangers start to see it. So folks like you that have seen the link and now we're talking about it, or people that are going to come out to the theaters across the country over the next few weeks, that's really something to look forward to. And I'm really excited about it. I'm so proud of this film and really hope that people are going to show up and come and see it.
Well, this is hardly the first incredible thing that you've worked on. And you are, for lack of a better term, a pop culture historian, because there's very few people who could produce stuff on Sergio Mendes and Jonathan Winters. You know what I'm saying? Like you've been all around different facets of comedy and music and film and all that. So how much did you know from the end product of this Blood, Sweat, and Tears documentary before you started? Did you know all of it, or did some of the story unearth itself over time for you?
Great question, Darren. One of the great things about this film is that it's a largely unknown story. I didn't know anything about it. Most people don't, because the band for many, many years was unable to say anything about it. And that's what made it so interesting for me. It started about, I mean, I was a fan of the band.
Right.
Love their records and love that blend of jazz rock and that powerful horn section.
Mm-hmm.
So when Bobby Colomby called me out of the blue about 2 months before COVID hit, and he said, I want to take you to lunch and tell you a story. He had seen the Chasing Train film I had made a few years ago and liked it, and happily he called me. So we went to lunch and I was telling him how much I liked the band, but I said to him, what the hell happened to Blood, Sweat, and Tears? Here you guys were one of the hottest bands going, and then suddenly you weren't. What happened? He said, that's the story I'm going to tell you. And he only really kind of knew, Darren, the general framework of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, when you're traveling with a band, you're busy rehearsing and practicing and all that kind of stuff. And there are 9 guys, and not all of them saw all of the things at the same time. So it took a lot of work for me and my creative team to piece together the whole story. And we were able to do that through finding a lot of top secret, declassified government documents, finding a lot of film footage. So people who are going to come and see the film are going to learn a lot, but they're also going to be entertained by a lot of film that they've not seen before.
Now, you said, what the hell happened to Blood, Sweat, and Tears? That declaration / title is not too far from your Harry Nilsson documentary, which I loved. I loved that. Was it a coincidence that you had 2 similar titles like that?
Probably not a coincidence. You know, I think
that's your brand.
Yeah, no, I think it's more. I just think in a certain way, and I wanted to have a provocative title that we hope that we answer by the end of the picture. You know, I think most writers, if you look at them, they have a style, they have a technique, they have something that they do, and many of the titles that I've done are somewhat provocative, and prefer it that way. There's so many films coming out. There's so many options to see on streaming and all of that. So you want to come up with something that will kind of cut through the noise, and somebody says, you know, I got to go see that.
Well said. Well, if I could talk about myself for a second, I'm putting together a book that's coming out early next year on David Lee Roth from Van Halen. And Van Halen is one of the hardest bands to crack because there's a lot of people who just won't talk. There's a lot of things that are behind closed doors, etc. Van Halen is up there, but I would have to say that Blood, Sweat, and Tears is a more challenging one because you have the Al Cooper era, you have the David Clayton Thomas stuff, you have the fact that neither of those guys own the band, Bobby owns the band, you have different lineups, you had periods where there was 2 or 3 Blood, Sweat, and Tears versions on the road at the same time. What was the hardest part for you in getting this done? Was it estate clearances or was it the government documents?
I would say government documents and COVID. COVID really was a challenge for us. When you're researching a film, you need to have access to libraries and archives and sources for footage and photos. And during COVID, a lot of those places were closed up or
Right.
operating like at half speed. And so that slowed us down. Also, we couldn't really fly anywhere to do interviews with the band members or our experts. For example, David Clayton Thomas lives in Canada, and we
Right.
couldn't get into Canada. It was closed to Americans. So those are some of the biggest challenges. What was not a challenge really was the band. You rightly talk about the various iterations over the years. You know, it's interesting. Some Blood, Sweat, and Tears fans love the Al Cooper album and poo-poo the rest. Others love the David Clayton Thomas era and poo-poo the Al Cooper. I love it all, so I have no bias in any way there. And yes, the band has gone through many versions over the years, and in fact, there still is a Blood, Sweat, and Tears out there today, touring small performing arts centers, jazz clubs, and casinos, things like that. None of the original members are in it, but the band, I think, because they had been unable to tell this story for so many years, I found all of them were quite excited to be able to tell their story. And you see it in the film, Darren, with Bobby and Steve Katz and David Clayton Thomas, Fred Lipsius, the sax player, and Jimmy Fielder, the bass player. But they all have their own personalities. They all have their own perspective on what happened. And so for me, that was one of the fascinating things, was bringing that all in and figuring out how best to balance this and to find out where the truth really lies. But you know, it's interesting, as they look back, it's with a combination of emotions. There's some sadness at what happened to them. There's some anger at what happened to them. But then I think there is also some great pride at what they were able to accomplish in those few years where they were really at the top of the music charts. But also what they were able to bring to young people in Eastern Europe. And that's what, you know, one of the things that's always the toughest thing when making a film is, how do you end it so that you leave people on an up note and feeling very excited. And to see the impact that this band had on the teenagers and people in their early 20s in these communist countries, the freedom and the excitement of this music, the joy of this music, was really something to behold. And I think they were quite proud of being able to bring that to those audiences.
You know, I think it's a shame that a band so successful like Blood, Sweat, and Tears didn't necessarily have the legacy management of some of their peers. So, for example, the Doors were together for what, 5 years? I mean, if we don't count the post Jim Morrison albums that we pretend like don't exist and all of that.
Right.
But the legacy management, because there's posters of Jim Morrison still being sold in greatest hits comps, and they're still unearthing stuff. Hendrix has been dead for 53 years, and we're still getting unreleased stuff. Yet Blood, Sweat, and Tears being a pre-MTV era band, it's kind of like Grand Funk Railroad, where you had some of the biggest songs ever, but it wasn't a face-oriented band. It wasn't an MTV era band. And I think we kind of forget how massive Blood, Sweat, and Tears were.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key point. And I think, again, armed with our title of What the Hell Happened to Blood, Sweat, and Tears, what happened to them, as we reveal it in the film, is why they're not remembered in the same way as some of the other bands you've described.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the passage of time. It was the unique circumstances in which they found themselves. And just to speak about one aspect of it, there are many parallels between what's happening in our world today and what was happening back in 1970 in America. Country was polarized. left and right. The world was polarized east and west, Russia and the rest of the world, like we are today.
Mhm.
Cancel culture. Blood,
Yeah.
Sweat, and Tears was an early victim of that, even though we didn't know what that was back then, didn't have a name. And I think it was a partial because of those unique circumstances that the band really was unable to overcome that. And that's why I think today, if we can accomplish something with this film, it's get the band the reassessment that they deserve.
Well said. Well, hey, as I mentioned at the top of this interview, you've never stopped working, or at least that's what IMDb has brainwashed us to believe. Are you allowed to say what's next, what we can look for next coming from you?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I just locked picture last week on a new feature documentary. It's going to be on Paramount Plus later in the year, with the theatrical run before. And it is about, it's the true story of what was going on behind the scenes of the making of the Elvis Presley '68 comeback special.
Really? Okay,
It,
that's fantastic. That's something I want to see as well. John.
it's a very dramatic story, and they didn't tell you the whole true story in the Baz Luhrmann film. So people ought to watch us, and we can maybe get together and talk about that at that time. But we've had a lot of fun making it, and people are going to learn a lot.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you put that tag at the end. They didn't tell the truth in the Baz Luhrmann film, because I recently interviewed Billy Stanley, who is one of Elvis's stepbrothers, and fortunately he had a Zen-like attitude of going, "Oh yeah, it's entertainment. Most of that didn't happen. That's cool."
And I can only speak for the comeback special because I know so much about it. Some of the general things happened, but they took a lot of dramatic license, which is great, really, because that kind of opened the door for us. And here we are able to tell the real story. And there were a lot of interesting dynamics going on between Elvis and the young producer, director Steve Binder on one side, and the nefarious Colonel Parker on the other side. So it's a very sort of interesting dynamics that we'll be able to explore.
And then following up on that, you now have this great career path where I think people know of, hey, we want to cover what really happened with somebody, with a classic entertainer. So if I could put words in your mouth, it sounds like there's no shortage of projects coming from you in the near future, that there's more people that go, oh, okay, we can trust this guy with telling the real story now.
Well, from your lips to their ears, that would be nice. I hope so. I mean, it's always nice when somebody calls up and says, hey, you know, I saw one of your films, and let's talk about doing something. I'm blessed to be working and busier than ever, and that's great, but I'm always on the lookout for the next great story. That's what it really is for me, Darren. It's not so much how successful an artist was. It's really, is there a fascinating story to be told? So open to any and all great stories.
I look forward to the Elvis one. Congratulations on the Blood, Sweat, and Tears one. The Harry Nilsson one still holds up in a fantastic way. John, thank you for the many years of great entertainment, and looking forward to what's to come.
Likewise, Darren, I hope we'll talk again soon.
Paltrocast.